The ideas expressed in City Club forums are those of the speakers and not of the City Club of Cleveland, IdeaStream Public Media, or their sponsors. Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.
Hello, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to creating conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. It is Friday, April 4th, and I am Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ+ newsroom, and moderator for today's conversation, which is in partnership with the 49th Cleveland International Film Festival, or CIFF. Many of us are familiar with the story of Sally Ride. She became a household name after she became the first American woman to blast off into space. In fact, in September 1983, she actually joined the Women's City Club right here in Cleveland to speak to a crowd of over 500 people. Though many didn't know it at the time, Sally's celebrated trip to space would also make her the first lesbian in space. As she journeyed among the stars, Sally managed to keep a nearly 3-decade relationship with author and tennis player Tam O'Shaughnessy a secret. On Saturday, April 5th, CIFF will screen the documentary film Sally, which is a chronicle of Sally Ride's challenges as a pioneering woman in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM. It also brings to the surface the sacrifices she made during her years together with her life partner. For the first time, Sally, the film, tells the whole story of this complicated and iconic astronaut. From National Geographic Documentary Films, Sally is directed by Emmy Award-winning filmmaker Cristina Costantini. Yet, let's put it in some context, this film also comes at a very fragile time in America's political climate, where, once again, the LGBTQ+ community is caught in the crosshairs. Add to this an anti-DEI movement, both nationally and here in the state of Ohio, that many believe will threaten to set back decades of progress for women in STEM. What can we learn from the life and legacy of Sally Ride, and are we destined to confront the same challenges as Sally did in the 1970s and 1980s? Here to answer these questions and many more, all the way to my left is Amanda Cole, the executive director of Plexus LGBT and Allied Chamber of Commerce, where she champions inclusivity and economic empowerment for LGBTQ+ and allied professionals. Under her leadership, Plexus cultivates partnerships that advance equality, dismantle barriers for LGBTQ+ entrepreneurs, and contribute to economic growth. And to my immediate left, Marcy Frumker, president and trustee at the International Women's Air and Space Museum, which aims to collect, preserve, and showcase the history and culture of women in all areas of aviation and aerospace. Marcy is also the space advisor for the museum. That's a very cool title, by the way.
I created it myself.
That's the best way. And Marcy is a lifelong space flight enthusiast who first got involved as a volunteer for the museum when it moved to Cleveland in 1998. If you have a question for our speakers, you can text those questions to 330-541-5794, and City Club staff will try to work those questions into the Q&A portion of the program. Members and friends of the City Club of Cleveland, please join me in welcoming Amanda and Marcy. All right, Marcy, space advisor for the museum. Let's start with you. Can you give us a sense, before we even talk about Sally Ride, can you give us a brief sketch of women in the space program pre-Sally Ride?
Yes, so going back in time to the 1960s, we have a really cool exhibit at our museum called Quest for the Stars that talks about this era. And at that time, there were the Mercury 13 women who took the same tests, both physical and psychological tests, the original male Mercury 7 astronauts took. And they weren't sanctioned tests by NASA. And in the early 1960s, basically NASA and the country was not ready for women in space. It wasn't until 1963 that the first woman launched in space, and then that was by the Soviet Union, Valentina Tereshkova. It wasn't until 20 years later that Sally Ride launched to space in 1983.
Thank you. As long as we're in this history place, Amanda, can you talk a little bit about the Lavender Scare? It's going to be some level setting for everyone here in the room and also those listening in to talk about LGBTQ plus issues in the workforce.
Yeah, so we're familiar with the idea of the Red Scare, and it's part and parcel of that same moral panic. So what was happening under Eisenhower in the 50s, and this went through until 60s, 70s, was a systemic, purposeful, and public purging of LGBTQ people from the public sector and in the federal government. And then we saw ripple effects of this into the 60s and the 70s with Anita Bryant and trying to pass different legislation that disallowed us from teaching, from being teachers. And so it just pushed out, it caused fear, it disallowed people to rise up into different places of leadership within the government. And anytime we're talking about anything to do with LGBTQ, that means everybody. That is Black folks, right? That is Hispanic people, that is differently abled people. It's all different kinds of people because our identities don't get siloed together. And so that means that it was a purging of leadership and belonging at the federal government, and it was sanctioned. It is the same thing that we are hearing almost word for word with the executive orders that we are now hearing around from the Trump administration to disallow us specifically in the federal government, and it has ripple effects out into the private sector. These kinds of moves don't just stay in a glass jar in society.
Thank you. Let's talk about the film a little bit. The film is a must-see for so many reasons, but for me, how Dr. Ride had to navigate the media and the questions that they asked. At one point, I think it was a reporter from Time magazine or Life, or it was, I shouldn't call out the magazine that I'm not sure of, but specifically asked her, if you encounter a problem in space, do you think you'll weep? And it just encapsulated all the pressures. Marcy, how would you frame the pressure that Dr. Ride must have experienced?
Well, she experienced a tremendous amount of pressure, Ken, and really, so she was one of the 6 original women astronauts at NASA, and one of the reasons why they picked her was they thought that she could handle the pressure, specifically, kind of like when they picked Neil Armstrong to be the first man on the moon, another Ohioan talking about today. But anyhow, they really were trying to make sure that while she was training for the flight, that she was protected. And the influx of all the questions and media attention came after her flight.
Yeah. And Amanda, noted queer film critic, I wrote it on my paper. What themes left off the screen for you?
Well, just to the pressure, when you're watching the opening sequence, it's all about the pressure of blastoff. And then you hear these interviews where she says things like, I don't want to do something stupid. And that is the pressure that we feel when we're the first or when we're the one and the only. Like everything rides on us so we don't mess it up for anybody else like us. And then that pressure, you can probably hear that, well, coming out as a lesbian would have been something stupid, right? She couldn't be both. She couldn't be a double minority in that regard. And I think that was really amazing. I think also to just kind of also armchair psychologist it a little bit.
Sure.
She probably did so well with the pressure because her family was literally like, we don't talk about feelings. There's a part in the film where they ask her mother, well, how did you feel about that? And she was like, that's none of your business. And then they come around again, they're like, well, why do you think you have such a hard time with feelings? And she was like, if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. And I was like, let's compartmentalize and go to space, apparently. I don't know. Those things just really stood out. It's a beautiful film. I really hope you all take an opportunity to see it.
Well, let's start by bringing the context into today's climate. First, Marcy, can you talk about Sally's legacy?
Yes.
About what she left behind, the doors that she opened, and the LGBTQ plus astronauts that came after her?
Yes, so Sally, of course, wasn't acknowledged as gay until she passed away. That's, you know, a big part of the film. But there were a lot of women who looked up to Sally when they were considering what kind of careers they wanted to do. And they have told me, and written in books, that it was really seeing Sally and the other first women astronauts go to space that gave them the courage and believability that that was something that they could do too. You kind of have to see it to be it, is kind of the way it's said. And that was really important to a lot of them. Now, finally, there has been some news about gay astronauts, and one of them came with a woman who's up on the International Space Station right now. Her name is Anne McClain. And when she was on her first mission to the International Space Station a couple years ago, her partner was trying to finagle money out of her, basically. It was accusing her of wrongdoing, and it came out that she was gay. And it ended up that Anne was not guilty of any wrongdoing. This was all on the other person's part during this time. But then it finally, you know, came out that we did have a current gay astronaut. And another woman astronaut, her name is Wendy Lawrence. And while she was an astronaut, didn't admit that she was gay, but came out later when she was attending some functions at the Naval Academy, where she graduated from, and brought her spouse with her, a woman. So finally, these things are coming more to light.
I was so struck by the part of the movie of Sally actually blasting off into space. I think, what was it? It's like 500,000 people showed up in person, and so many of them not just were women, but had infant daughters because they wanted their infant daughters to be present during that moment. And so it had to have opened just so many doors in that way.
Absolutely. Like I said, finally people could see, women could see young girls when they were in, maybe they were in middle school, maybe they were in high school, maybe they were in college, but they could finally see a path for something that they wanted to do. And before that, it was only male astronauts. That was it.
Can I say, there's some things I was thinking about here. We were talking about opening doors. It reminds me about the film Woman in Motion, which my friend M. Carmen Lane reminded me of, and the role that Nichelle Nichols played, because it wasn't just men in the room, it was white men in the room, and we have to be specific about this. And one of the things that she said in that film was, I'm gonna open this door so wide that they'll be able to see the whole world. And so it's this idea too that, like, how is it that all of our ships can rise? Like, how is it that we can all kind of blast off? If we recognize that we do not have everybody in the room, when we recognize who is missing, and we think strategically about why they're not there and how we can remove those barriers, and then to ask somebody like Nichelle Nichols to help bring folks in the room, it opens up that door for all of us. And I think there's also some words that you use that were really interesting. Acknowledged that she was gay, admitted that she was gay. Here's the thing, we are always acknowledging and admitting who we are in some kind of rooms and to some people. It's just the threat and the challenge of everybody knowing, or the language and the honesty and the vulnerability of putting it into words that we always don't have the privilege of doing. And we also saw this with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Many times people were employed and their partners here stateside wouldn't be able to have those benefits, wouldn't be able to attend those military funerals and be given the honor of losing somebody in service to America because they were not allowed to be fully out. And so that story that you shared, while it's like very trifling what that partner did, and it's like, doesn't look good for us gays, but you know, we don't all have moral high ground all the time, or you know, life is complicated. But many times that might be the way that somebody kind of was outed, and then also the way that those partners are left out and not included. Yeah.
I'm confused by the idea that gays don't always have the moral high ground,
I
but
know.
we'll move on. That forum will be coming up next week. Marcy and I already know the answer to this because we're both geeks, but just for some level setting, if anyone listening in doesn't know who Nichelle Nichols is.
Right, so Nichelle Nichols is an actress. She passed away a couple years ago, but she was the first black woman on Star Trek, and she played Lieutenant Uhura. Star Trek, one of my favorite shows growing up, and hopefully some of you liked it as well. But what happened is NASA hired Nichelle Nichols and her company, which is the same name as the film documentary, Woman in Motion. Actually, it was done, the producer was originally from Cleveland, and the writer was from Cleveland as well. So there we go, back to Cleveland. But NASA hired her to specifically seek out women and minorities to apply to become astronauts because people didn't really believe that was happening. And just for NASA to say that wasn't enough. But when they hired Nichelle Nichols and her company, I've seen in that film, the documentary, that people who later became astronauts, finally were convinced, hey, maybe we can do that.
By the way, none of that was on my question list, but I assume that with the title Space Advisor, you knew all of that stuff. So that was perfect.
Ad nauseum, what can I say?
I love it. We need to talk about ERGs. Yeah. So this is a two-part question, Amanda. First, the easy part. For folks who don't know, what is an ERG and why are they important?
Yeah, so every time we come up with an acronym, that's fine, but we need to make sure everybody in the room knows what the meaning is. So diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And one of the strategies of creating that in organizations is through employee resource groups or affinity groups. And the point about this is that you're giving people of different identities, whether it's caregivers, disability, orientation, an opportunity to see themselves within the organization and come together and have connection. But also, ideally, you're listening to them around the policies that they need so that they are informing what leave policies look like, what healthcare looks like, how the door should open, literal doors, so you can actually get into your office if you're gonna do work. So that's what employee resource groups are. Yeah, and they've been seen as a proven best practice for employee retention, return on investment of time, just like all good stuff. And they've become very commonplace.
I wish we could just leave it as
I know.
they're all good stuff. But the second question is, what is the status of ERGs right now?
Well, we have friends from NASA here that we're very grateful that they are joining us today. And they, our friends, helped to start and lead those ERGs in NASA. And the day after the executive orders came back that DEI efforts were dead and illegal, like this language in the federal government, that was stripped away. Things like not being able to wear a pride badge to work, not being able to introduce yourself with your pronouns or change your name, like just really basic things that for LGBTQ ERGs they might be a part of. It puts in a severely chilling effect. When you are told in the federal government that if you were involved with anything to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, that you're going to be put on a list, or that you're immediately fired, that you're walked out of your office, it creates the moral panic and the fear again. It doesn't stay in a container. So what we see in the private sector is twofold. It is people absolutely, and companies like the Cleveland Cavalier saying, we are committed to this, this is not going anywhere. And then we have other companies that obeyed in advance, which is the greatest way to teach tyranny how to use their power. Because if we obey in advance, if we say, if we give this first, they won't take more from us, we are false. So we've seen in some corporations and companies having to roll back, and maybe in higher education, if it's tied to federal funding, it's actually having to comply with the law. So we saw this at Tri-C, having to get rid of their DEI office. We've seen this now in higher education. But what is happening is it doesn't matter what the language is. We didn't always have these words, but we've been doing this work. We've been doing the work to exist and be in leadership in organizations even when they tell us we're not allowed to be there. And in American history, we've been telling a lot of different people for a really long time that they're not allowed to be there. So this is not new, right? This is not new. For some of us, it can feel like the first time that we're going through this, right? Especially for like white folks, this can feel like the first time that we're being targeted in this way, but it's not new. Yeah.
Speaking of that history, the film does so well, Marcy, to bring LGBTQ plus NASA history onto the screen. Talk to us about how the preservation of that history is right now in danger.
Yeah, so it's really important. Even one thing that is going on right now, so was Apollo back in the 1960s going to the moon, and now there's the Artemis program. And so the whole thing that's been on NASA's website until recently was that we were all going to have our first woman and our first person of color landing on the moon. with the Artemis program. Suddenly now that's wiped out of NASA's website. So yeah, it affects everything. And I think it's really important for a place like our museum, the International Women's Air and Space Museum here in Cleveland, to be able to present these ideas and concepts about women, black women, gay women, any kind of woman, so that those stories are out there and people can hear them, especially in this kind of a chilling environment where those stories at universities and our governments are all being closed.
Amanda, Dr. Ride wasn't out at work.
Right.
That wasn't part of her journey. What are we hearing about new concerns about being, and you spoke to this a bit, but expand more on the concerns around being out in the workforce right now?
Yeah, so we have statistics that show the way that even before this. So there's this statistic that says that young professionals, when they first move in their career, 1 in 3 go back into the closet. What does this mean, right? So this means that if that were me, and I did this early in my career actually, I might talk about my partner in neutral terms. I might refer to my wife as my friend. I might avoid talking about what I did over the weekend. I might not tell you what neighborhoods I went to or what bars I go to. I don't want to cue to you that I'm gay. And then for transgender and non-binary people, this might mean that they delay or don't live their whole selves with their pronouns and their names or getting the medical care that they need to be well in their body. They delay that so that they're not out at work. That is like what happens there. When that goes on, so the way that this happened for me, I was interviewing for a job. I really needed a job after grad school. It was after the recession. It was just tough. And I'm interviewing, and I'm not mentioning my partner the whole time, which is really weird because we have kids together. So now it sounds like I'm a single mom. That is something I have been, and that has a whole other level of discrimination. And finally, I just said, like, look, I'm gay. Like, I'm gay. I totally, like, have a fiance. It's great, or whatever. I don't know if she was my fiance at the time. I don't remember what you were. Right, yeah. But like I wasn't acing the interview because I was thinking like 5 steps forward and 5 steps back. I was so nervous. So it reduces productivity. We're less likely to stay at companies that we can't be out. We are less likely to get a promotion, right? And then unfortunately when we come out, we also might be less likely to stay because we have harassment, And any harassment I might experience as a cisgender, white, middle-class lesbian, multiply it times 3 if you are a queer person of color, multiply it times 3, literally, the statistic is multiply it times 3 if you're a transgender person. So even as I experience that and I share that, I have privilege as well in it. And that's how it works. And so it's important to be out. The City Club had Billy Bean here. He was a baseball player, and he talked and then he became the LGBTQ liaison commissioner. I can't remember the terms. He talked about how he did not do well as a player because he was hiding his life. It does deep psychological damage. And so if we are supposed to like fly in space and like run bases and do sports things, like we're supposed to like operate at a high level, you can't be hiding an essential part of who you are and how you love. Yeah.
Amanda will now be moderating all the sports stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, I should do better.
They're applauding you questioning your relationship status on stage, which we've never seen before here. That was amazing. One of the hallmarks of pretty much every article we do at the Buckeye Flame is an Ignite action section. Just a couple items where people can take the content that they read and actually do something with it. Marcy, after people watch the film, the credits roll, what do you want people to do?
Well, I think what they should do is get more of a understanding of who Sally Ride was. Because a good part of the film, the beginning of the film, talks about the space flight, her going to space, and what happened after she was in space in terms of the media barrage that came to her. And she then, when she left NASA, she started a company called Sally Ride Science. And what she wanted to do with that, with her partner, Tam O'Shaughnessy, by the way, was to educate young women, young girls, so that they also would be interested in science and technology. And they wouldn't be afraid about going into those kind of careers. And so that's a big part of it. Of course, also, there's her relationship with Tam O'Shaughnessy. And I read in a book about Sally Ride, a great book by Lynn Shear, the former ABC reporter. She talked about some people knocked Sally after she passed away for not coming out as gay when she was alive with her partner for 27 years. But another person commentated, well, that would have been breaking 2 glass ceilings. That's kind of a lot to ask for one individual in their lifetime.
Yeah. Amanda, on that topic of what do you want people to do?
Yeah, so I think that every time we're in a room, we should ask who's missing and why are they missing and what can I do about that. I think take very seriously how people that are already marginalized and on the margins are feeling right now, right? Or the fear that is really, really, really happening. I think that if you have the opportunity in a workplace or an organization to make sure that you're level setting and strengthening diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging opportunities, that you should do so. And I think that you should call your representatives and you should vote and you should organize, because we should always be doing those things. And we especially should be doing them now. Like, I think it's clear how important that is. It can feel futile. I called my representative the other day about the SB1 or something, I don't know, something. It was Amelia Sykes' office, so it had to be federal. And I was all ready to like leave this message about how important this was, and I can't believe you. And it was like, hi, it's Amelia Sykes. I forgot she was my representative. And I was like, oh, thank you. Yeah, so like I was gonna be really upset and tell you how this can't happen. And then I was like, so you know what, just thanks for doing what you're doing. So I also think it's important to thank people when you see them doing the thing that you believe is right and good. I think that it's really important on the comments page, on an article, for instance. Like folks are bold. They've always been bold. Every time there's a Pride night, all of a sudden, like, they're coming for me and I'm a terrible person and we're groomers and all this. But they're more bold now. And so we tell our board, hey, we have a news article that's going up or something, and we ask people to flood the comments with positive things. When your library shares books, just books, and then you can see that there's terrible comments, message them, because there's probably like a 24-year-old who's like, why the hell am I allowed to say that word? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
I love that your face just said, I broke City Club. Yeah.
You all have no idea about my patois. But they're probably like, why am I running the social media for the library? Because they're getting such hateful things. So literally just write and be like, hey, thanks for sharing that book. I'm gonna go get it. You're doing a good job. Like, yeah, I'm gonna stop.
Before we get to the Q&A, Marcy, I'm gonna give you the last word as space advisor. I'm never gonna not say that, by the way.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. Why should everyone see this movie?
I think it's a really good film in terms of giving you the background of what was going on in the early 1980s, late 1970s, when Sally and the first group of women astronauts were selected. So that was 1978. Her first flight was 1983. But I think it gives you a good understanding of what was going on in terms of history and context at that time. And absolutely keep it in mind for what's going on today, and see the parallels and the connections, and make sure you have an understanding of that as well.
And those connections are there. I'm obsessed with the media and how the role that the media played here, and you can still see that if you, there's so much tennis in the movie, which made me happy. But if you watch, there you go. If you watch the differences these days between press conferences for male and female tennis players, you see exactly that we have not come that far. But we have come far in our program. We're about halfway through, and we're about to begin the audience Q&A. For our live stream and radio audience, again, I'm Ken Schneck, editor of the Buckeye Flame, Ohio's LGBTQ+ newsroom, and moderator for today's conversation. We are partnering today with the 49th Cleveland International Film Festival and discussing the upcoming documentary film Sally and what we can learn from the life and legacy of the first American woman in space, astronaut Sally Ride. Joining me on stage is Amanda Cole, Executive Director of Plexus, LGBT and Allied Chamber of Commerce, and Marcy Frumker, President and Trustee at the International Women's Air and Space Museum, and it doesn't say it, but and Space Advisor. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, as well as those joining our live stream at cityclub.org or our live radio broadcast at 89.7 IdeaStream Public Media. If you would like to text a question for our speakers, please text it to 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794. And City Club staff will try to work your question into the program. May we have our first question, please?
Thank you, and thank you for a wonderful program here. I have a personal question for each of you, and then a bonus question for Marcy. The personal question is, given the avalanche of news that we are all facing, how are each of you facing it? How are each of you coping with? How do you get up in the morning? Give us some secrets. How are you all coping with it? The bonus question for the Space Advisor is there a woman in space or aviation history whom you think is particularly unheralded? They're all unheralded, but is there one in particular that you think her story should be told?
Start with the news. How are you coping? I would like to remind everyone that your questions are not intended to cause depression. Yes. How are you coping?
Yeah, well, first, I think sometimes it's okay to just not be coping. Like, that's just like a full stop, and just be okay with that. Like, that's my mental health thing. But also, I set timers, especially on social, and I try to flip up my algorithm. So I'm watching different things, I'm engaging in different aspects. Like, maybe I want to see a protest movement, maybe I want to learn something, maybe I just want to watch butterflies, That's a little bit of what I do. I look to the headlines, and then I sometimes go and find people who are kind of dissecting that and telling me what it means. I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I try to listen to them to get their take on things. I follow and like and read the Buckeye Flame, which we all should do if you want to know what's happening at LGBTQ Ohio, which again, is kind of for everybody. And I know one of the things that you're doing, I might be stealing your thunder here, but it also came up yesterday at the Cavaliers Employee Resource Group Summit in the LGBT breakout room, is just focusing on joy. Focus on the good stuff, And I know that that's what you're doing as well at the Flame, yeah.
How are you coping?
Yeah, so, it's difficult reading the news every day, seeing what's going on. It's hard, right? But I guess I have hope that there's people out there who are thinking in a different way and who don't want to see this kind of way continuing in our world. And so I have hope for young people, especially, that they don't want to see this continuing. I am upset at what's happening in terms of money from the federal government being taken away from museums who could be presenting information and history about what's going on in our country in the past and the present, so that they can't tell the stories about amazing people. But I think it's also important for a place like our museum, the International Women's Air and Space Museum, to be sure we're getting the word out there, because we're not handicapped by this. We can tell the stories about these amazing women in aviation and space and get that out to our communities so that they can have discussions about it. We're not handicapped by that, so I think that's very important. To your second question, and thank you for that question. It's a tough one to pick, but I guess I'd go back to the era of the 1960s and Wally Funk. So her real name is Mary Wallace Funk. And she was one of those Mercury 13 women. In fact, she was only 20 years old when she took those tests. She had to get her parents' signatures because she was so young in order to be able to do those tests. And she's the last surviving one. And she had wanted to go to space for so many years. She'd done all sorts of things after her aviation career was over, incredible aviation career. But she actually did get to go to space a couple years ago on one of these private commercial space flights, suborbital Blue Origin flight. And so she got her 10 minutes up and down. And so I think she's a great personality to talk about, and I have met her a couple times, and she's just a fascinating character.
Thank you.
Hello, this is a text question. With the recent DEI executive orders, can you speak to your concerns about a potential decrease in supporting women in STEM? How will this impact the competitiveness of America in the global science, tech, and innovation industry?
Sure. Well, it's very disconcerting, and to see this happening when there's been such great strides that have been made since the Sally Ride era in the 1980s. And so I'm hopeful that even with these cutbacks, that people will still be enthusiastic about wanting to have their young children, be they girls or boys, to be interested in STEM and to go after careers like that. Because I think that is very important to still have grassroots efforts, even as this money is being taken away from so many important organizations.
Yeah, I'm really concerned because it's not just saying we're not allowed to do this anymore. They weaponized it with money. When money goes away, it doesn't come back into budgets easily, ever, maybe. We're also like removing words. Like you just can't have words. Somebody, a PhD student, a woman in STEM, lost her funding. Her funding was denied because her project had the word diversity in it. She's a bioscience. So she was looking at the diversity of a forest ecosystem, and she can't get funding. And that's bizarre. It's bizarre to me that we can't speak about women and transgender people and Black people, and like that we can't talk about people and their contributions in science and technology and engineering is bizarre. Right? Because we should be able to do it. So I'm very concerned because of the funding impacts, and I'm also very concerned because of the compliance in advance, right? I'm concerned about it in higher education. I'd like to see some of these endowments being used, and I'm in fundraising, so I understand restricted dollars and blah, 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 and donor intent and all this. But I would like to see some of those billions of dollars that are being sat on being used to actually choose to fight and continue to invest in areas where we know no matter how enthusiastic you are, you might not pursue that career because you also need to get paid. You need to get money, in your career. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for being here today. Senate Bill 113, sponsored by Senator Andrew Brenner, it would ban diversity, equity, and inclusion in all public schools in Ohio. What is that going to look like for students who are members of the LGBTQ plus community, and what kind of support will be available for them?
And if I can just add in the extra note of nowhere in that legislation is diversity, equity, and inclusion defined.
They don't define it anywhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we have kids, and so when we're always having these clear conversations with our young people because we're also aware that us being gay, them being raised by lesbians, means that they're kind of coming out around that. So we've always had to navigate that with them and allow them to have their different level of comfort with that. And they're feisty, so we actually have to calm them down a little bit about it. So, but the conversations that we've had we're literally strategizing with our children. So we are talking to them about how to tell their friends who are queer that they need to come up with some code words. They need to use new language so people don't know, but they need to make sure that their friends who are queer or themselves are talking, because you need to. We're telling them that they need to be really careful how they go to teachers, and they need to tell their friends that as well. And so what we're trying to do on a personal level is get into our school district to figure out how to support those teachers, tell them those same tactics. And that also, I think it's important that we can meet with our superintendents and our school boards because they can find ways to comply and still create the best safety nets for those young people. But we know that it's not going to be great. I mean, even in the film, Tam and Sally met when they were 13, playing tennis. And they might not have known it then, but a lot of kids know who they are at 13. And who wants to be 13 and have feelings for anything ever again in your life? None of us want to do that again. So multiply it by being told that you're not allowed to exist. I think it's going to be extremely challenging, and here's the thing. We're going to see people leaving healthcare, and we're going to see people losing the teaching professions, which we already do not have enough people in post-pandemic. These are the two places in our society that we saw the way that we were overburdening direct service folks already in our society. We haven't bounced back from that, and they're not going to continue. Who wants to go and teach when you don't even know if you can mention, and ask somebody about their moms or their dads, in that case. So yeah, I'm really, really worried about it. So we're trying to teach our kids tactics for how to be well, how to have codes, how to take care of each other, we're like, you need to make sure everybody knows what teachers not to trust. Let it be known. And the kids already know. They always know, all the time.
I think it really makes the case for, in addition to the bill that our wonderful colleague just shouted out, this is why it's so important that everyone keep on top of the legislation that keeps being introduced. In the last 48 hours alone, in sub-bill HB 97, which is the budget, it's supposed to be about the budget. What was added into that budget is a number of clauses that will make it difficult for LGBTQ plus youth, not the least of which is Ohio officially only recognizing the genders of male and female, taking any books that have LGBTQ plus content out of view for anyone under 18, and defunding homeless shelters if the homeless shelter in any way affirms trans youth.
And the thing is that we know about young people, it's always hard to track people who are homeless young people. It's impossible data. But we know that youth who are houseless are likely, 40% of them are likely to be homeless because they are LGBTQ, because they are trans. And then youth who are moving through the foster systems, when they come out, if they let folks know that they're non-binary or they're trans or they're gay, they lose those homes. And then they're not able to find affirming places to be. So that is extremely challenging. It is hard to take care of any young person who doesn't have a stable home. It is hard to get them networked in the way that they need to be. We don't have good solutions around it, and that we're gonna leave up to 43% of those kids out of our shelter system is terribly shocking.
This is another text question. How can Plexus help support Cleveland organizations LGBTQ plus ERG groups? Are there any upcoming events or volunteer events that organizations can get involved in?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, so what we do is we have done this since our inception. We found ourselves in boardrooms that maybe other queer organizations weren't invited in. We helped to stand up the first employee resource group at Key Bank and Progressive because of our founding board member, Thomas Hahn. So we've been doing this work since 2006. So we've seen it, our board has seen it in a number of ways. We work with 50 different companies in their employee resource groups. So first, start and stop. If you are wondering how to do this and how to figure it out, please contact us. We're at thinkplexus.org. We convene ERGs monthly for any number of different topics, and those are also very open all the time. One of our really wonderful programs that we focus on for emerging and young professionals is called our Queer Executive Officer Dinner Series. So it's just it's a little cheeky around CEO. So it's an out executive officer. And it's just that sitting at the table, it's 30 people, it's dinner, family style. And it's, questions like, what would you tell your younger self? What was your biggest challenge? What did you study in school? But always, no matter what, somebody says, what was it like when you came out? How do people treat you at work? How did your parents treat you? I mean, you have 33-year-olds who are still wanting to find from elder people, like how we did it. So that's on April 22nd, and it's with Dr. Scott Latchley, who is the president of the West Shore campus at Tri-C Community College, so that's open. But we have a number of events. You can go to our calendar and find them there. And then also we have a directory page. We have 450 members. That is a significant number of members for a small chamber of commerce like us. And it's also important to hear in our name, we're the LGBT and Allied Chamber of Commerce. We are open to everybody. It's just, you just know that when you're in the room, you're in the room for a particular reason. Like if you're not a member of the community, that's okay. You're showing up in our allyship. So our directory page is really, really important. There you're gonna find folks who are doing the work. So if you're looking for a job, any company that's a member, they're doing something. And the thing is I mean, at Fortune 500 companies, I have a direct line to somebody in the ERG, and I can tell you immediately what they're doing to support an inclusive and welcoming and affirming workplace. So yeah, we're open for business for everybody.
And we do want to officially thank Michelle Tamalo for texting in that question on Plexus. So thank you. Fun note, because I like mentioning it, tell us when the Scott Latchley conversation is.
April 22nd, and it'll be at the West Shore campus.
And in what a small world it is, he was my supervisor when I was an RA at NYU in 2000. That's how small this world is.
We have another text question related to Amanda's point. If you have a coworker that you notice may not be their full self at work, what's a good way to make them feel more comfortable or support them?
That's great. So one would not be like, well, so it's a mixture of things. Like one of my least favorite things is like, oh, I know somebody that's gay. It's like, great. Do you know them if they're gay? And here's the thing, people of color are very familiar with white people saying these things. So we often do this. We try to get like proximity and familiarity, and we kind of stumble and drop the ball. So, but you do want to have some visibility, right? So wear an ally pin. I mean, right now, you know, have things at your desk. Go, if there is an LGBTQ ERG, go to the ERGs. The things about these ERGs is they are open to everybody. So if there's an African American employee resource group, white folks should go into that space in allyship. Just recognize that sometimes there might be programming or opportunities where maybe that door is closed to you if you're not a part of the group, and that's also okay, right? That doesn't mean don't ever come in here. It just might mean like right now, no. I think just also asking people, hey, how you doing? How are things going for you? If you do know that somebody is a member of the LGBTQ community, just pay attention that these bills coming down, the fear that we have is very, very real. So if you're in that opportunity to just recognize that, maybe acknowledge it. If you're a manager, shift their workflow, right? See how you can shift their workflow. Think about ways that you can just be responsive to maybe take things off their plate. I think that those are some important ways, but you kind of just want to signify we're just looking for visibility, and you can also let folks know, hey, things are really hard, and I'm here for you if you need anything. The other thing, somebody said this, I can't remember, but it was about not being a silent bystander. So like, as always, just speak up. If somebody makes a joke or an offhanded comment, these things are often like, they're little pieces of sand. And then you know how that feels, like when it's like in your shoe or something, it hurts over time. That's how it feels when people say well-intended things, or they say crass and discriminatory and hurtful things purposely. You should speak up if you can. So, and it can just be as easy of like, why is that funny? What do you mean? Where did you hear that? I don't agree with you. Please don't speak about them that way. Just nice and calm. You don't have to go like elbows up, but you can say something, you can still speak up.
And that was certainly in the movie as well, of Dr. Ride's male colleagues and the many comments that they made. And what did you make of those parts and the regret that some of them expressed?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, one of the people interviewed in the film is Sally's husband, who was a male astronaut, Steve Hawley, at the time. And I thought it was great that he was comfortable talking about his early life with Sally when they were both brought into the space program at the same time, and also hearing comments from other astronauts, male or female, talking about Sally's influence in her whole story.
Yeah, thank you.
This is a text question. Great talk. I wish I had the IWASM in the area when I was a young person, as I have always had a fascination with space. Are there any programs for young girls that come into public schools for exposure to these careers?
Yeah, so it's important, obviously, to get the STEM story out to the community. Our museum does try to do that. We do tours and talks for everybody. We do tours for adults. We do tours for children. And sometimes in our tours, they can be space-related or they could be aviation-related. It's whatever the different group wants. And so they get to do some kind of a craft kind of a thing. We also will be having our annual Rocket Day sometime in June. And that's a really low-cost way for kids to come and see. We have NASA professionals there who will shoot off real rockets in the parking lot at our museum. And they also will be able to make their own stomp rockets that they get to step on a 2-liter pop bottle and watch it go fly up in the air. So it's a lot of fun, a cool event, and it's only a couple dollars per kid. So look for that in the future.
Okay, my mom said I wasn't allowed to do that, so that's intriguing. But can you actually talk a little bit more about the International Women's Air and Space Museum?
Yeah.
Raise your hand here if you've been to the museum. Ooh, some folks have.
go.
Wonderful.
Love it.
I mean, it was still only 8 of you, but that was really good. What will we see there? Amanda and I have not been there.
We will. We're going to go on a
Yeah, we're all
field
going
trip
together as a group after this. What will we see there?
Yeah, so thanks, Ken, for that question. Appreciate it. So the museum actually started back in 1986 in Centerville, Ohio, right outside of Dayton, and moved up to Cleveland after they ran out of space down there in Centerville in 1998 and opened to the public here in 1999. So we've been in Cleveland a long time, and we don't want to be Cleveland's best kept secret. We want the word out there. We're a free museum, so you can come and enjoy the museum anytime for free. But of course, we are a tenant at Berkeley Lakefront Airport, so we have to pay rent. We have a couple staff members who we have to pay, who do a lot of the work for the organization. And so we do have fundraisers throughout the year. We have a May the 4th event coming up, a trivia night, just in about a month or so. And we'll also be having a murder mystery coming up at the end of May. And we have a acting group hired to come and put on a show. They did this a year ago, and it was a kind of a space theme. This year, it's an aviation theme. So that's a fundraiser, and it's a lot of fun, and you can dress up if you want.
Well, everybody should dress up.
No, we're all City Club's renting vans. We're all going together right after this. Last question.
Yes, another text question. Does it seem to you that despite whatever is happening at the White House, our society is getting better at telling these stories? Thinking about this film and others, such as the Diane Nayed film, Who Swam the Straits of Florida.
How are we doing in telling these stories?
Yeah, I mean.
More to tell.
Yeah, I think we are making progress, and also who's telling the stories? That would be my other question. Like, are we having more folks with the same lived reality producing, directing the stories? And I would say, yes, we have had some increase in that. Women, people of color, queer folks telling the stories. I want to continue to see that grow, and I think that it is going to be challenging. But sure, I think we've gotten better. But I think that there's a lot of critiques, and I'm also probably saying that from a really privileged place of thinking that it's better, because I might not be as affected, or my story might be more likely to be told in a certain space, especially like even in the queer space. You know, you're going to focus on me as a main character, and not a trans woman of color, more likely, right? So I think we've gotten better, but I don't think we're at a landing place.
Maybe we'll end with the power of this content. Marcy, Space Advisor, how did you feel at the end of the film?
Yeah, I felt that it was a well-done movie. I think that they did a great job in terms of telling the story about Sally's life, about how she got interested in STEM and was able to accomplish what she wanted to do in terms of becoming an astronaut. That wasn't really even her goal in life. She wanted to be a physicist because she liked physics. That was her thing. And she saw an ad in a newspaper at the school she was attending, Stanford, and just decided to apply. What the heck, right? And she got in. She became an astronaut. So I think her lasting legacy is really told by a lot of women astronauts who came after her. And they're the ones that really carry on the story now that she's passed, and in terms of encouraging other women, young girls, to be interested in STEM and just go for it.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much to Amanda Cole and Marcy Frumker for joining us at the City Club. We're going to applaud for you in just a second. Forums like this one are made possible thanks to generous support from individuals like you. You can learn more about how to become a guardian of free speech at cityclub.org. That's cityclub.org. The City Club would like to welcome guests at the table hosted by Plexus, and they would also like to thank the Cleveland International Film Festival for their programming partnership with today's forum. You can view the film Sally on Saturday, April 5th at 4:55 p.m. at the Mimi Ohio Theater in Playhouse Square, and use code CityClub for $1 off your ticket. Coming up next Friday, April 11th at the City Club, we will hear from key leadership engaged in Policy Bridge's new urban agenda for Cleveland, and I'm told it's a very hot ticket right now. They will be discussing the goals of the urban agenda and to celebrate the potential for significant impact on Northeast Ohio's economic growth. Randy McShepard, chairman and co-founder of Policy Bridge, will moderate. You can get tickets, but get them quickly and learn more about this and other forums at cityclub.org. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of today's forum. Thank you once again to Amanda and to Marcy. I'm Ken Schneck, and this forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
The ideas expressed in City Club forums are those of the speakers and not of the City Club of Cleveland, IdeaStream Public Media, or their sponsors. Production and distribution of City Club forums on IdeaStream Public Media are made possible by PNC and the United Black Fund of Greater Cleveland, Incorporated.